We're providing transitional funding for your budgeting process in 2020.
Sure, they've delayed some of those cuts now, but they're still coming.
After backing down the first time, the Ford government will try again to make funding cuts to municipalities. Call them cuts version 2.0. Their impact likely to be felt the most by public health and daycare. When they were first announced earlier this year, Mayor Tory called them an attack on the city, and eventually the province backed down. But that all changed today. Angelina King is following the story from Queen's Park. She joins us live now from Queen's Park. And Angelina, the cuts seem almost the same, but they're getting a much more muted reaction this time around.
Exactly, including from the Mayor of Toronto, who says he appreciates the government's efforts and understands that the province is dealing with a deficit. But some people today still did say that the cuts are wrong. So right now, municipalities are just trying to sort through the numbers and figure out exactly how much it would cost them. The mayor says that he will be keeping an eye on the cuts to childcare funding, saying that that could have a big impact on next year's budget. Although he did say that the numbers released today are quite a big improvement compared to the cuts that were previously announced and then scaled back.
3 months ago, Premier Doug Ford announced the reversal of controversial municipal cuts to public health and childcare.
We're a government that listens.
Today, in front of a group of municipal leaders in Ottawa, he was back at a podium with similar sentiments, but a different outcome.
We recognize our government moved quickly when we came into office to address our inherited challenges. But my friends, we're listening to you. Today, I'm so excited to announce this to this room that we're providing transitional funding for your budgeting process in 2020.
Translation, some cuts are now coming January 1st. The province will foot 70% of public health costs. Currently, it picks up 100% of the bill in some municipalities. In Toronto, it's 75%. The board's chair says services like student breakfast programs, vaccinations, and disease prevention are at risk.
Fundamentally, public health is about preventative health care. It's about preventing the diseases of tomorrow. And so this is a fiscally irresponsible decision that will have harmful consequences. And for the life of me, I can't understand why the Premier would have done this.
Municipalities will also be paying for 20% of the cost of creating new childcare spaces, which were previously provincially funded.
Sure, they've delayed some of those cuts now, but they're still coming, and that just creates uncertainty, stress for families, and sort of chaos at the municipal level across the province as they try to scramble to figure out what's happening.
Toronto Mayor John Tory says he appreciates Ontario listening to municipalities, but says city taxpayers shouldn't pay for much of social programs.
Most of that should be coming from these other governments because they have the tools to raise money through income tax and corporate tax to pay for them. And that's the way it was intended by Confederation, and that is the way it should be.
Now, all of these cuts all have to do with the province's $11.7 billion deficit, though today the Premier did announce that he will be increasing ambulance funding by 4%. Now, you might remember back in May when he announced more than $7 million to go toward audits for municipalities to try and find some savings in their budgets. Today, he applauded the 90% of them that took him up on that offer, and that does include Toronto. Dwight?
Thank you, Angelina. Now, the Ministry of Labour is taking a Toronto businessman to court after he failed to pay employees for years. CBC Toronto first brought you this exclusive story a year ago, revealing the man owes millions in unpaid wages, penalties, and taxes. And as Lisa Shing explains, workers are still waiting for their money.
We tried everything to pay everybody.
Outside Ontario International College, our producer gets a surprise phone call from this man, Antoine Zhang, who owes millions of dollars to former teachers at the school he runs and employees at a now-defunct media company, North Star.
Because we don't have the money. We ran out of business.
The Ministry of Labour has filed 18 Employment Standards Act charges against Zhang and his companies for failing to pay $1.4 million in wages. They also owe more than $5 million in taxes and penalties in Ontario and British Columbia. Over the last couple of years, several employees have told CBC News their stories about Zhang owing them money, including Wei Lu.
It's very tough for me emotionally and financially. It's all tough. I was like super broken.
Between 2015 and 2016, Wei Lu worked here as a graphic designer for one of Zheng's newspapers. She still owed about $15,000. This man, who first shared his story with CBC News a year ago, is still waiting on $10,000. Both filed complaints with the province 3 years ago.
I think it's not about the money anymore. It's about justice and the rights. People come to this country and find a job, and it's a legal job. We pay tax.
Zheng says workers like Wang and Lu didn't do a good enough job to keep the business going.
The staff are not working hard enough. Some of the staff are idling around, so they didn't work hard enough to make enough money to make the business survive.
Zheng agreed to an on-camera interview during this call, but days after, his number was no longer in service. We've called Zheng on his cell phone, which is now disconnected. We've emailed him. We've called his wife and left a message. We've also called Ontario International College, the school he runs. So to really do our due diligence, we're going to see if he's home. Despite our attempts, don't hear anything inside. No answer. After all this time, Wang still thinks the province will get them their money, though Lu isn't as hopeful.
I think he took advantage of this process. He knows the process is going to take him so long.
All right, Lisa joins us now with more on this. And you mentioned it's not just wages this businessman apparently owes.
No, it's not. He owes the Canada Revenue Agency hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid taxes. He also bought the former National Post building in North York, which was supposed to house one of the schools. Now, he still owes almost $3 million to a lender for that. And Zheng has also been sued a number of times as well. And over the course of our investigation, we discovered he also has a school in Vancouver, which owes more than $200,000 in wages and penalties, according to the British Columbia Ministry of Labour.
On that province, too. So what can these provinces and the CRA do then to recoup some of this money here?
So this is where it gets tricky, Dwight, because we were able to find out he owns a house and 4 condos in Toronto. So technically, a sheriff can seize and sell them. But the problem is the CRA has put liens on them, which means these properties won't be released back to Zheng until he pays those taxes he owes. So now it's about waiting to see what happens through this court process. But, you know, considering that this has been going on for years, it doesn't seem like it's going to be wrapped up anytime soon.
And these young people would like their money that they worked for. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Dwight.
An Oakville homeowner is speaking out tonight after her for sale sign was seized by the town. The offense? The sign was apparently hanging over town property. It's all part of a new policy in Oakville, and as Shannon Martin reports, it's not going over well with some residents.
A tiny patch of white dust and a discarded wooden post. That's where a for sale sign once stood on Reshma Niezi's front yard.
And it's not there anymore?
No, absolutely, because I got a call from the realtor.
Without warning, the sign was seized. An Oakville bylaw inspector said it was hanging over town property.
I actually had no idea that, you know, this piece of land didn't belong to mine, because I am expected to water it, to shovel it, to look after it as much as possible.
Just across the street, another mystery disappearance.
The sign disappeared. We don't know where it is.
This realtor had put up 2 signs advertising a home for sale on a private laneway. But that's 1 sign too many, according to bylaws.
Maybe understand that the rule is important to make the town in a good order. We don't want the signs to be everywhere. Give us a chance to correct it ourselves instead of just go ahead to remove it.
This city councillor says Oakville recently reviewed its sign bylaws after homeowners complained of too much clutter.
Do I think that we should drive by every street and, you know, pull out the measuring tape and that's at the top of the list? Of course not. But if you are in violation, you're in violation.
Before, any violators would get a warning, usually a phone call. Now inspectors remove signs first and tell residents later. Signs are then stored in a warehouse like this. To get them back, you've got to pay a $59 fee.
I don't understand why they can't basically just provide a notice, put a sticker on the sign or knock on the door or call the realtor to say, you know what, this has to be removed. We're giving you 2 days to remove it.
Basically going back to the old warning system, something the town says it would consider if enough people complain. Shannon Martin, CBC News, Oakville.
Now in Toronto, enforcement officers are permitted to immediately remove any real estate sign that violates bylaws, though the city said it only takes that step when there is an immediate safety concern. Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, we would love to hear from you. Just send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. It's a universal consensus among scientists. Climate change is real and action is needed now. But saying that could now be deemed a partisan issue thanks to an Elections Canada policy that has environmental groups speaking out. It's all because Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada, expresses doubts about the legitimacy of climate change. Now, any group that promotes climate change as real or an emergency could be considered partisan, even if they don't mention Bernier or his party.
The question I think that needs to be asked is, why is the law structured in a way that silences people speaking the truth about a scientific reality during the election cycle? Why is it that we're not allowed to say that climate change is happening when only people that are completely out of touch with the social, political, scientific, and social consensus around this issue are taking that position?
If groups want to bring up the issue of climate change during the campaign, this new policy could force them to register as a third party. Justin Trudeau weighed in on this issue today.
Of course, I will always respect Elections Canada's role and responsibility to independently apply electoral law. But I think the whole question highlights the fact that it's so frustrating that there are still Conservative politicians in this country who don't think that climate change is real and certainly don't think we should be doing anything to fight it.
A few other party leaders came out with their opinion on the issue today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh tweeted, "One climate change denying Maxime Bernier isn't equal to a worldwide scientific consensus that the climate emergency is real and urgent. It's not partisan to discuss the single greatest threat faced by humanity." Green Party leader Elizabeth May likened the policy to a politician deciding smoking was good for you, asking, quote, "Would doctors have to register as a third party in an election to stress the importance of kicking the habit?" The city is teaming up with the federal government to shore up the city's shorelines. Today, they announced a joint $30 million investment to fix erosion damage from previous storms and protect against future flood risks. Taylor Simmons is live along the Martin Goodman Trail near Ashbridges Bay, one of the locations expected to benefit from this funding. Now, Taylor, the shoreline there is pretty beat up.
Yeah, it's a picturesque location for sure, but Martin Goodman Trail is one of the areas that was hard hit by storms in 2017. There was high winds last year and then record high lake levels this year, and you can see the effect of that. We've got fencing blocking off a huge chunk of the trail right here. If you look over, you can see the effect that the flooding's had. Some of the sidewalk looks to be crumbling off now. If you look a little further down, where there was grassy bank, now there's fallen trees into the water. And this isn't the only place that is seeing these effects. The Toronto Region Conservation Authority tells me there was $15 million worth of structural damage after that storm in 2017. Things like lost sand and stone material protecting the beaches. You'll see Ashbridges Bay, the boardwalk suffered, the islands were hit hard, the Scarborough Bluffs as well. And obviously the city wants people to be able to enjoy these parks now and in the future. So today officials announced this funding, $18 million from the city and almost $12 million from the federal government. Here's what they had to say.
That is money that is going to go to invest in our waterfront all the way from Etobicoke to Scarborough. At 35 different projects will be funded by this. We will have a shoreline and a lakefront that people will be enjoying in generations because we took these steps now.
You all remember 2017, the flooding we saw here along the shores of Lake Ontario. I remember walking down here and downtown, and it looked like a bathtub that was about to overflow. And we all thought that was a once-in-a-generation occurrence. Well, sadly, it's not, because 2019 saw water levels that exceeded those of 2017. This is an issue we have to deal with, and we have to deal with now.
So this $30 million investment is not only supposed to clean up sites like this on Martin Goodman Trail, it's also to protect them from future weather events. So it's supposed to add large boulders or more trees, or even on the islands, they're talking about raising the roadways to protect from flooding. And these funds will be used across 9 square kilometers of public land. But Dwight, later in the show, we're going to talk to you about what's happening on some private land in Etobicoke. I spoke to some residents of an apartment building there who say their back parking lot is actually crumbling into the lake, and they want to know why it hasn't been fixed, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, the 100-year flood seems to be happening every year now. Important stuff. Thank you for that, Taylor. And I was out at Ashbridges Bay this weekend. It was beautiful, but they called for rain Saturday, Colin, and we got it. But we still partied anyway.
Yeah, I know. You'd find a way to party anyway. Good on you. Well, you know what? We have a slim chance for an isolated shower overnight tonight, and then tomorrow afternoon, kind of the same thing. But in general, what most of us will be experiencing is just very summer-like weather in terms of we'll have some sunshine tomorrow and some of that humidity still in place as well. And speaking of humidity, well, the current temperature is 27, but because there's some humidity out there, it feels like 29. Earlier in the day, we were up to around 33 with our Humidex there. So yeah, it's still a little bit sticky. It stays that way till about midweek and starts to change towards the end of the week. Now, at this point, we're not talking about wet conditions, and it's a really slim chance. Like most of us will stay, 95% of the viewing area is going to stay dry tonight, but a stray shower could hit you, and I just want you to know that chances there. And then as we go through the day tomorrow, again into the afternoon, scattered shower not out of the question, but otherwise we will have some sunshine to start, and then the clouds will start to build in a little bit later in the day, and that risk kind of comes into the forecast as well. For most of us, overnight tonight, 14 degrees, so close to seasonal. Last night we were closer to 20 degrees for the overnight low, and those winds fairly light as they come in. But then tomorrow, again, a few more clouds. By the way, 28, it's still going to feel like we're in the 30s with that Humidex. Isolated showers now into Wednesday. Those showers become a little more widespread. That's kind of our turnover day. I'll explain all of that coming up, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
A 19-year-old man has now been charged with impaired driving causing death after a crash in Richmond Hill. It happened last night on Yonge Street near Stouffville Road. The impact was so severe, the engine of one car was found 100 meters from the crash site. A 44-year-old man in a white Mazda was pronounced dead at the scene. A woman and a boy in that car suffered serious injuries. In all, 4 cars were involved. A 19-year-old Richmond Hill man has now been charged with impaired driving causing death and 2 counts of impaired driving causing bodily harm. The accused, who suffered minor injuries, appeared in a Newmarket court today. While you are enjoying all the tastes the X has to offer, Toronto Public Health wants to assure you everything is safe.
This is correct, so we're quite happy about that. The main things are looking at temperature control, make sure that things aren't contaminating each other, so raw and cooked don't get in the way, and pest control.
TPH food safety inspectors are working on site and behind the scenes at the CNE to inspect all food trucks and drink stands, helping ensure that people are kept safe from foodborne illnesses. The inspection started on opening day and will run until Labor Day. They include checking the way food is produced, stored, handled, and consumed. TPH wants to remind the public that inspections are happening, especially after the cronut catastrophe back in 2013, where the contaminated donut burger concoction caused 150 people to become sick with food poisoning. To check out the inspections for yourself, you can head to the city's website to see the results.
Never want to have weeks of protest carrying on. We want real results.
The latest pro-democracy demonstration in Hong Kong drew one of the biggest turnouts yet. It was peaceful, but after 11 weeks of unrest and more rallies planned, police have a message for protesters. That story after the break.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Police in Hong Kong praised pro-democracy protesters today for remaining peaceful during yesterday's huge demonstration. It's been 11 weeks of unrest in the city, with demonstrators demanding less political interference from China. With more protests planned this week, police also issued a warning they will meet violence with violence. Chris Brown has more from the city on the edge.
Well, Hong Kong more or less returned to normal today after a pretty good turnout for that march yesterday. Organizers peg it at about 1.7 million people. And just to put that in context, that's about 20% of Hong Kong's entire population. It's a measure, though, of just how tense things are here that some media are now actually referring to the number of tear gas-free days in the city. So after the event wrapped up, there were no significant confrontations between police and protesters. So that makes it the third night, the third tear gas-free night in a row here. It is also hard to quantify, though, exactly how much closer this has brought organizers to their goal. They've asked for 5 things, broadly speaking, focused on checking Beijing's influence here, halting an extradition bill, and also asking for an inquiry into the events of the last 3 months. I spoke to Bonnie Leung.
We never want to have weeks of protest carrying on. We want real results. So we are trying to contact Carrie Lam and see if she is really have sincerity to talk to us.
Carrie Lam is the chief executive of Hong Kong, and she has not met or shown really any inclination to meet with any of the protesters over the last number of months. It's also very hard to see that anyone appointed by Beijing to look after this territory would offer any kind of concessions that would diminish China's influence. So for this movement, it really does appear to be at a crossroads, and that is worrying for many, because then what you have left is a lot of radicalized protesters who, over the last number of weeks, have had a lot of encounters that have ended badly with police. So there's going to be some frustration there, and the concern is that could increase the violence still. It will still be ongoing in the evenings here. Chris Brown, CBC News, Hong Kong.
The star of Disney's remake of Mulan has thrust herself into the Hong Kong protest story. Now her comments are leading to calls for a boycott. We'll have that story for you coming up. We are hearing from the Canadian woman who survived a deadly attack in New Zealand that claimed the life of her Australian fiancé. In a tribute sent to an Australian TV channel, Bianca Buckley described Sean McKinnon as, quote, the light and love of my life, my greatest teacher, my protector. Buckley, a midwife originally from Halifax, also says she is determined to see justice carried out. An intruder shot McKinnon dead while her and Buckley were sleeping in the camper van on Friday. She escaped. A 23-year-old man has been charged with murder. He appeared in court over the weekend, but police continue to search for the weapon involved.
The erosion is quite significant. The parking lot is at risk.
And it's getting worse and worse. Lakeshore erosion has residents of this Etobicoke building worried about their safety. Coming up, why it's taken so long to find a fix.
It's dangerous for us. It should be done something.
The federal government announced more funding for autism programs today, and at the same time, taking a jab at how the provincial government has handled the issue. Even though many parents applaud the new money, they believe no level of government is doing enough. Natalie Nanowski explains.
Our government is deeply committed to supporting those living with autism and the dedicated folks who take care of them.
Today, Ottawa announced it's giving $3 million to fund 6 different programs for teens and adults with autism, some in the GTA, others in Montreal and Regina. Bruce McIntosh has a 17 and 19-year-old with autism.
A kind of an underwhelming, announcement. What we need are national standards for treatment. We need research. We need real action to deal with the autism issue.
Those who work with autistic youth say there is a huge need for programs that help them transition into the workforce.
Without services that help build those skills and reduce those barriers, it is going to be very hard for these adults, even if they are helped to secure a job, to maintain the job.
Today's money isn't new. It's part of the 2018 budget announcement. Most of that $20 million has already been distributed. Ottawa's announcement comes just a few weeks after Doug Ford's provincial government backed away from a controversial plan that sparked protests outside Queen's Park. Today, the feds made sure to criticize the progressive Conservatives, but also stress that Ottawa isn't in control of Ontario's health care.
They pulled funding for these families with no notice, with no consultation, and left them fearful for what was going to happen to their child. That's not a role for the federal government to come in and say, okay, well, province, you've made these cuts, we're now going to fund them.
Families say they're going to continue to push to make autism a federal election issue come this fall. They're also urging the province to step up and provide better services for their children. Natalie Nanowski, CBC News, Toronto.
Parents who care for children with disabilities at home say the challenges can increase as they age. One big concern, putting a long-term care plan in place. As Jason Vio explains, parents say right now their options are limited.
It's overwhelming for me. You know, it makes me emotional because if anything happens to me before that, what happens to him? Where does he go?
That's what Barb Scott thinks about each and every day while stuck on a government waitlist for her son Matthew. He's a 21-year-old with Angelman syndrome. That's a severe neurological disorder that strips him from his ability to communicate. She cares for him at home 24 hours a day.
To have a shower, I got to put him in his room, put a baby gate up, turn the alarm on the house so he doesn't sneak out, so I can have a quick 10-minute shower. You know, you got to fight now and try and get him in, so when he gets in, then I have a peace of mind that if anything does happen to me, I know he's well taken care of already. Like, that's just a huge burden off the shoulders.
Scott is in her 50s and says it's becoming increasingly difficult to care for him at their Leamington home. And the thought of waiting another 20 years?
I try not to cry, but I do. So, yeah. Oh, thanks, buddy. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, and this is why.
And she's not alone. The Ontario government says there are more than 18,000 adults with developmental disabilities waiting for residential services.
It's exhausting.
Abby Poisson carries around this bag wanting to go to a sleepover. She's a 25-year-old with autism who's also nonverbal and needs a lot of care. Her mother, Leanne, wants to give her that independence, but they're also waiting for provincial funding.
I feel like we're being discriminated against because we have a daughter that has a disability, and that the government is expecting, they're relying on us to care for her. So they're not giving the funding that she needs to live independently, because they know that we will continue to live, to care for her until that happens.
The government says there's an increase in adults with disabilities requesting residential supports. A spokesperson also says it's not a first-come, first-served list. People most in need are prioritized, but they wouldn't say exactly what's being done to address the lengthy wait list. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Airbnb has permanently shut down the account of one of its biggest operators in Canada after a CBC News investigation revealed a slew of bad reviews and canceled reservations. In fact, it appears the account was quietly suspended as early as June. But guests who had already booked to stay at one of the properties say no one at Airbnb let them know, and they didn't discover the problems until they walked in the door. Barry Willette went looking for answers.
Oh, no.
When she isn't running after her two kids, Stacey Lapierre is running her online business. And this Nova Scotia mom decided she needed a vacation.
Yeah, this is the one that we booked.
Using Airbnb, she rented a loft in Montreal for her and some girlfriends for $200 a night. It was listed by AJ and had lots of great reviews in April. But when she and her friends walked in the door in July, they could not believe what they saw.
The floors were disgustingly dirty. There was broken mugs. There was yellow shower curtain. Like, it was just like, where are we? Like, this did not look like what we had booked.
We just felt like dirty being there.
She pulled up the listing again. Now it was littered with terrible reviews. Big disappointment with this apartment. Decrepit and dirty. Mold in the bathroom and dirty tub. Cockroaches in the kitchen. Airbnb had blocked the host from taking new bookings, but that was weeks before Lapierre and her friends arrived. She had no idea until we told her.
If he was suspended in June, I would have had ample time to get my money back.
In fact, a CBC News investigation earlier this year revealed the host, who uses the name AJ, offered more than 90 listings on Airbnb in Montreal, nearly the most out of anyone in Canada.
So it kind of stood out with the poker table. And
André Caron also booked one of those properties. After AJ was suspended, Caron noticed the same apartment now being offered by someone named Barry. Skeptical, Caron canceled.
I think enough bad reviews should essentially ban you from the site.
Both Caron and Lapierre want to know what Airbnb is doing to protect customers. Once we started asking questions, both AJ and Barry's accounts were completely shut down by Airbnb.
Airbnb says it closed both the accounts because they violated its policies and that travelers with pending bookings will be fully reimbursed. But it still hasn't explained why people weren't warned sooner about this. Valérie Ouellette, CBC News, Toronto.
Earlier, we told you about a new $30 million investment into Toronto's waterfront. It will go towards repairing public land and protecting it against erosion. But residents of an Etobicoke apartment building say they need help too. Their back parking lot near Kipling and Lakeshore is crumbling into Lake Ontario, and they say no one is fixing it. Taylor Simmons has their story.
Orange construction fencing and jagged pavement now separate this lakeshore apartment from the water's edge.
It's dangerous for us.
Eventually it's going to come up to us. And plus, like, we have the underground parking there, and that's going to be a total nightmare at that.
Residents say a patch of land disappeared after a major storm in May 2017. It left many trees stranded and residents uneasy.
The erosion is quite significant.
The Toronto Region Conservation Authority monitors risks along the shoreline. They were called here in 2017 and found...
Looks like a portion of the parking lot was built where there would have been former shoreline.
That shoreline owned by the province and built on without permission. The property's current owner is now working to get authorization to occupy the land, but it's unclear if they get approval that they would fix the erosion problem. The new owners of the building declined to do an on-camera interview, but said in a statement they were aware of erosion issues when they took over the building last December, but determined no urgent action was necessary. They went on to say, after assuming ownership of the site, we decided to act diligently and pursue further investigations, which remain ongoing. Should additional actions be required, we will communicate fully to residents and with city staff. McDonald says the lot does need to be fixed, but the TRCA has limited funding to help in private scenarios.
At the end of the day, it is a private property issue. If left unaddressed, we would expect that they would lose additional parts of the parking lot.
So for now, some residents here are left wondering what will happen the next time a storm hits.
They should come out and do something finally.
Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
And those storms, Colette, are coming more and more often.
Yeah, they sure are. It's like we kind of have to get used to our new reality. It almost seems like, just a few weeks back, I had that conversation with Dave Phillips, and one of the things we discussed is this idea of a 100-year flood. Maybe we leave that kind of talking about things in that way or flooding in that way to the engineers, because really for the rest of us, there's a new reality in terms of what we are experiencing. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to experience overnight tonight in terms of our forecast. So temperature is seasonal. Last night we were closer to a low around 20 degrees, and now we're talking about a low down into those mid-teens. That's kind of more where we should be. Clear for most of us. An isolated shower not out of the question, but tomorrow that risk comes in again late day, late afternoon, early evening. Could have a stray shower, a little pop-up because of the humidity in the air. And then into Wednesday, we're going to see more of a widespread, kind of in waves in terms of some showers that are going to move through. And again, could have some embedded thunderstorms there as well. These are the current temperatures. So what an evening we have. Summer's definitely not over with yet. Not only is the temperature 27 degrees, but we still have a humidex like this. So it feels like 30 out there. Don't tell me this isn't patio weather. We still are experiencing patio weather for sure. And what happens is that as we get through midweek and those storms on Wednesday, that kind of is going to exchange the air mass for one that's a little bit drier in terms of how it will feel and becomes more comfortable towards the end of the week. So as we go into these overnight hours towards the morning hours, just a stray shower possible. Otherwise, some sunshine, then some clouds kind of building in. And into tomorrow afternoon, again, few isolated showers may pop up. You get a bit of a downpour, and it's one of those things where, and you've got some sun in the sky, but it's raining. Yeah, that's sort of a situation we could see. Into Wednesday, though, they're come kind of in waves, so not continuous rain throughout the day, but you will experience it, and then things dry out and the sun comes out. Boy, oh boy, does it ever towards the end of the week. Overnight tonight, then, these readings look like this. Still some humidity, but fairly comfortable for those overnight temperatures. Humidex tomorrow close to the mid-30s, highs in the upper 20s, and then Wednesday still muggy, but the transition into Thursday, Friday, and look at those 23 to 24 as we get towards the end of the week, and a lot of sunshine to carry us into the weekend, too.
Love all that yellow. Thank you, Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dwight.
Women from across North America were in Ottawa over the weekend chasing an Olympic dream. They're also trying to help a Middle Eastern country make history. As Judy Trin tells us, they were trying out for Lebanon's very first women's national hockey team.
They've come from across Canada, the U.S., and even Mexico to compete for a coveted spot on Lebanon's national women's hockey team. Ottawa grade 11 student Mizreen Darwish has big hopes.
I want to break barriers for Middle Eastern women in sports and show that although Canadian ice hockey isn't a thing back home, Lebanese women can still play this type of sport.
24 women are trying out. Most are students, some are young professionals. One is a mother. The youngest is 15 years old, the oldest 36. Lebanon doesn't have a hockey culture, and with no talent pool to draw from, organizers are recruiting internationally.
Every single person on the team is of Lebanese descent. Right now, the current Lebanese law requires it to be via the father or the grandfather or the great-grandfather.
Organizers didn't know what the interest level would be or even how many Lebanese women played hockey, so they didn't put restrictions on skill. But the coach says he's been impressed with the players they've attracted.
There's girls coming from NCAA, which is a very college, playing college in U.S., it's a very good hockey caliber. There's players coming playing like recreational, for fun. There's girls playing. They've been playing high level maybe in the past, but the passion of hockey is still in there.
This CHIO employee has only been playing hockey for 3 years. At 32, Sulana Taha is also one of the oldest players trying out. Although she may not make the team, Taha says she can still be part of history.
It's an opportunity that I can say that I've done. It's part of history. We're the first team who's ever tried this, right? So I can probably tell my grandchildren that, hey, I was cool at some point in my life.
In order to get to the Olympics, organizers must raise enough money to build an ice rink in Lebanon. Judy Trin, CBC News, Ottawa.
Reminds people that Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, the Queen's favourite son, we always write here, was in the home of a convicted sex offender.
What was Prince Andrew doing at the home of Jeff Epstein. We'll get reaction from Buckingham Palace to this video after the break. Buckingham Palace is on the defensive today over Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. A video released by a British newspaper appears to show the prince at the convicted sex offender's Manhattan home after Epstein had served time in prison. Renee Filipponi has reaction now from London.
Prince Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein has thrust him into the midst of scandal for years. But the timing of this latest video has Buckingham Palace issuing new denials. In it, you see the Duke of York at the front door of Epstein's Manhattan home. He is waving goodbye to Epstein and a woman who get into a car. This video was taken in 2010. That's 2 years after Epstein pled guilty to soliciting a minor for prostitution. So the unanswered question right now is, what was Andrew doing at his home after that guilty plea?
This has been hanging over Prince Andrew for years, and he's always denied any impropriety. But the revelation of this extraordinary photograph of him peering furtively out the door of a convicted sex fiend, Mr. Epstein, is really devastating, because it reminds people that Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, the Queen's favourite son, we always write here, was in the home of a convicted sex offender.
Andrew has been the focus of allegations himself. This photo from 2011 shows the prince with his arm around a 17-year-old girl who Epstein brought to London. In court filings, there are allegations that Andrew groped a woman at Epstein's home, and another woman says she was forced to have sex with the prince 3 times while she was underage. Over the years, the palace has categorically denied any wrongdoing by Andrew, saying the allegations are false and without any foundation. But this latest video has pushed them to respond yet again. In a statement, the palace said the Duke of York has been appalled by the recent reports of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes. His Royal Highness deplores the exploitation of any human being, and the suggestion he would condone, participate, or encourage any activity is abhorrent. In the past, Prince Andrew acknowledged his friendship with Epstein was a mistake, but aside from these types of statements from the palace, no one has heard directly from Andrew explaining why it appears he maintained his friendship with Epstein years after the guilty plea. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Are the qualities we see in Mulan.
Disney is facing a boycott over its upcoming live-action remake of Mulan over comments made by its star on the Hong Kong protests. We'll have more on that for you after the break.
It is decided.
The anti-government protests in Hong Kong are showing no signs of letting up, and now Disney has found itself wrapped up in the fray because of one of its stars. Stephanie Skinderis is here to tell us about it. Stephanie, let's talk about the star of Mulan and what she said.
Yeah, this could spell some trouble for this big new movie that Disney is coming out with next year. So this started over the weekend with a post from Liu Yifei. She's also known as Crystal Liu. Now, she's a Chinese-American star. She is an American citizen, but she was born in China, and she made her career there. And she posted something on Weibo, which is kind of like the Chinese version of Twitter. It's actually a reshare from a government-run website called the People's Daily. It says, "I support the Hong Kong police. You can all attack me now." And in English, it says, "What a shame for Hong Kong." Now, this does have support. It had a lot of likes, but outside of that, a lot of backlash as well. Boycott Mulan was trending as a hashtag over the weekend on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all platforms that are blocked in China. And this kind of puts Disney in a tough position. They haven't commented. They probably don't want to because China is a huge market for them, and they are counting on Mulan to do well, especially because the first Mulan did not do well at all. You remember this one from back in 1998. It had the songs and the talking dragon. All of that is gone from the new version. It's much more serious and traditional. It's more true to the original myth. So let's take a little look at the new version so you can see what I mean.
We have excellent news. The matchmaker has found you an auspicious match.
It is decided. Come and sit down. It is what is best for our family.
Yes, I will bring honor to us all.
But if you remember the movie, Mulan is the kind of character who stands up, she resists what's expected of her, she fights, and people who are critical of Liu Yifei's post say that that seems to be in contradiction with her and the character.
Okay, but she's not the only star kind of standing with Beijing on this.
She's not at all. And as of today, we've actually seen several stars speak out in support of Beijing and in support of the One China policy. Let's start with the person who's most famous here, Jackie Chan. He's actually born in Hong Kong, but he says what's going on is sad and depressing. He's made those kinds of comments before, but some are now calling him a traitor. Now, here are three stars who have all made their success in South Korea as K-pop stars. Jackson Wang there on the left, he's from Hong Kong. Victoria Song in the middle is from mainland China, and she posted that Hong Kong is part of China forever. And then Lei on the right there, he's also from mainland China. He's a member of the popular group EXO. He is really speaking out. He canceled a modeling contract with Samsung, threatening to cancel one with Calvin Klein because they separate China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan on their websites. K-pop fans in general really split on this. Some say it's like spreading propaganda. There is support from inside mainland China. So whatever the reason for these stars to say these things, it seems like they're willing to risk losing their fans who back the Hong Kong protesters in favor of keeping support in China.
And this is not over yet.
No.
It'll continue for a while. Thank you for this, Stephanie.
Thank you.
It's the last guest you'd expect at a wedding, but a special appearance from this furry guy made the bride's day even more special. We'll have more on that. Yeah, we'll explain after the break. A woman in Saskatchewan got a big surprise on her wedding day. As everyone was gathering for photos, in walked in an alpaca.
It was so sweet. It just made me feel so loved that these people that surround me would do that for me and go to such measures to make me happy and make me smile.
The bride had never seen an alpaca that close up before. Her long obsession with the woolly animal led her bridesmaids to surprise her with one. The alpaca, named Chewy, because it kind of looks like Chewy Chewbacca, lives on a farm just outside of Regina. People visit the alpaca where the owner teaches them about the furry animal. The owner also taught the bride and some of her bridesmaids biology at university. There's the connection. That made the reunion extra special.
I could literally swear that her jaw hit the ground and she just started crying and tearing up and that type of thing. It was, I thought, the best gift that a bridesmaid could set up for a bride. She really did have a thing for alpacas. They're just absolutely phenomenal.
If you'd like a visit from Chewy, no need to pack your bags. Get an alpaca, okay, whatever. The alpaca simply hops into the back seat and comes to you. That is so cool, Colin. I know you're an animal lover. You must love that story.
I love that that's what would make her happy, that's what she'd want. But before I heard the whole story, I thought it just showed up. I didn't know it was a planned thing.
And Chewy is kind of cute. All right, 30 seconds left.
All right, let's talk then about what's happening overnight tonight. We'll see primarily clear skies, and I say primarily because there's just a little chance an isolated shower could spring up. But 14 degrees for the overnight low. Then tomorrow, some sunshine, then some clouds building into the afternoon, and again, an isolated shower possible. Dwight.
All right, we didn't get the chance to talk about your turtle rescue today, but we're going to have that for you sometime this week. We'll see you back here tomorrow night, everyone. Good night.